Awesome. All right. Welcome, Stan. How are you doing, my friend?
I am very good. The time zone is a little bit different. I think you're waking up right now.
Yeah, it's almost 9 a.m. actually where I've been up actually since I think 5 a.m. this morning. So I'm good. And
Wow.
and you're in Belgium and it's a little later in the day, right?
Yeah, just right before 6 p.m.
All right, not too
But
bad.
nothing we didn't handle in the past.
That's right. That's right. So Stan, thanks again for taking the time to chat with me. I'm really thrilled. I know you're busy. You carved out some time to chat, so I'm really excited to sort of jump in and learn about your leadership journey. For context, let me just give a little background as far as like who you are and how we
Sure,
met. So
let's do it.
Stan and I worked together starting back in 2014 at the same company, and that's been now 8, 9 years ago. And Stan was an individual contributor at that time, but in the last 9 years, he's worked his way up the ladder, and he's made it all the way to Chief Customer Officer at Teamleader, which is the role that you currently have. That's here
Yes.
in Belgium. So I want to just learn from you and talk about sort of your journey, your leadership journey from a career perspective. Again, where you were, sort of where we when we met, and then where you are now, and sort of the steps you took to sort of get there. And then the other thing I want
Yeah,
to touch
sure.
upon, yeah, and the other thing I want to touch upon is your education, because I think education plays a big role in success. And I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you've got not just one, but you've got two master's degrees. Looks like you've got a master's in psychology.
That
Um,
that happens a lot in Belgium.
yeah,
But
so I
I'll
want to
get
talk
into
about
that
that a
more.
little bit because I'm a big fan of psychology, and I think that having an understanding of basic psychology helps, not just in professional life, but personal life and self analysis and discovery and things like this. But then you also have a master's in general management from Vlerick Business School. So I'm going to want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah.
Um, so before we begin, is there anything for everybody watching that I didn't mention about you think is important to share?
No, no, I think that's about it. I think we met at just the right time, I think in my career. Yeah, it's true. We parted ways, and I kept applying and growing, and yeah, at Team Leader now, very happy to be there. Very happy to be in
Yeah.
SaaS. Definitely. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's me.
Now, and I know you like me, you're married and you have one child and a dog, correct?
Absolutely. A
Okay.
1-year-old child and a 13-year-old dog,
Okay.
which have their own unique challenges.
That's right.
I have to carry them both up the stairs. That's the summary.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right. Awesome. So, if there's time later, we'll talk about. I get your opinion. Oftentimes, I feel there's similarities between sort of professional life and personal life, and being a leader at work and being sort of the leader of a family or head of household. So, and the dynamic when you have children. So we can talk about that maybe a little bit later. But so first things first, what I wanted to ask you is, again, when you and I met, you were an individual contributor. And now,
Yes.
and again, in a short amount of time, I think 8 years, you made it all the way to, you went beyond VP and you're even a chief customer officer. So, first question is, was that your plan or did it happen accidentally?
Oh, that's I wouldn't say it was my plan. I never planned to be a VP customer success or a chief customer officer, but I did have ambition. I'm not sure if that's uh, an answer that fits the bill. I didn't. Obviously you dream, and if you're a little bit ambitious, you think like, oh, what are these things I can do? And then obviously, I think if most humans are honest to themselves, status and money always play a role in whatever degree that is meaningful to you.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously that my relationship with that changed a lot once you get into those roles. but yeah, I kind of rolled into it, and then when the path became clear, I did. Um, yeah, I did not accidentally apply for a VP role. I was very intentional, but you kind of arrive. I kind of arrived at that point, basically.
Got it. Okay. So if I understood you correctly, you didn't really, like some people will say, okay, by the certain age or within a certain amount of years, I want to have achieved X, whatever that is. Again, whether it's a title or maybe it's some sort of monetary sort of target. So that wasn't the case for you.
No, no, I always like when it became to like being a father or a dad, I did have like a time perspective in mind, like a timeline in mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you're a bit ambitious,
Yeah.
then the timeline is always like as fast as possible, obviously.
Yeah.
When you're young and an individual contributor, you're often still blind to the development areas that you still need to do and work on to actually make that possible. But I didn't have like something in my head like I want to be like a VP before I'm 30 or whatever. I'm now um, 35. I'm gonna be 36 in about a week or so. So I like maybe that's also interesting information. But yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't have like this plan or whatever. To the contrary, because I actually stepped away from SaaS and from customer success for about 3 years to focus exclusively on leadership.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Well, I want to know more about that right there, what you just said. You stepped away from to focus on leadership. Before we go there, real quick, but I wanted to ask you. So, considering you said it wasn't your goal or your target to become a VP or a CXO or Chief Customer Officer, if you're a fan of Simon Sinek, I'm just curious, what's your why? So, why do you get out of bed in the morning?
Oh, that's is Silent Cynic in America? I don't know. I don't necessarily have like a why I do get out of bed in the morning. Like I think I'm quite like I don't know normal like most people out there. Like I don't like have this burning thing in my stomach that I'm like, oh, I need to be the best at what I do every day or whatever. But I do like have my basic drive, basic ambitions just to be
Right.
a good person, to be a
Yeah.
good father. And I think that's also why I roll into customer success is because like, and I had to like, it took me a long time to figure this out, but what I get most energy from is like when I get to help people, but I
Yes.
don't want to like wear a white coat when doing it because my like I would not sleep. I would take all of those problems
Yeah.
home and
Right.
and and, and but in customer success and so on, you get to help a lot of people, make them happy, make them successful. And when you grow on that leader path, you get to make more people happy and successful. You can coach them and grow them into leaders of their own and that's how I kind of so that's what I get my energy from like that would be like a great day but I don't like
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that that would be my like my biggest why. Maybe that's something that will in the coming years when I mature more even like clarify further like it kind of like dawns on me like oh maybe that's my why. Today I'm just like enjoying that part a lot, I would
Hey,
say.
everything you said makes perfect sense to me, and frankly, I share the same sort of why. You know, I like solving problems, and solving problems adds value. And if you can make somebody's life better by helping fix a problem, then that's a win in my book. So as far as I'm concerned,
Exactly, yeah.
that's a legitimate why right there. If you had told
Okay.
me you get up out of bed to make money every day, I'd be surprised because obviously money is important, but it's not why
Yeah.
you should get out of bed. That is the outcome of our efforts. And again, if you're sort of following your heart, if you're following your dreams, the universe has a way of sort of aligning itself
Yeah,
for
like
you.
one of the people I work with today, she manages the biggest team in my customer success department, and then does the support team, and she's like 26 or 27. So like like seeing her progress, that's
Yeah.
like it gives me tremendous energy to be able to like push the buttons and
Ah,
spread and give the knowledge and so on. So now that I'm talking about it, like, yeah, maybe we're getting to that point where that's something that I'm, at least I'm very passionate about it, and
Okay, so you mentioned
maybe that's my life.
developing, yeah, you mentioned developing some of the talent on your team. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about that too. That's super, super important. I want to dig into that. But let me make sure I go back because I didn't know this about you. So you said you stepped away from customer success for a few years to focus on leadership. Talk to me about that more. Help me understand, like, why did you do that and what was it exactly that you did?
Yeah. When I we were working both at the same company, right? And then after 4 years, I decided to move on. And my first train of thought was I'm going to, basically run CS at a smaller company and then kind of grow with the company into, a VP role or a CS role, kind of looking for that ownership, that responsibility, that like there's no safety net anymore. Because that's something that I've done a lot in my life to grow as a person is just to like put yourself in situations where there's no safety net. Um, and just haphazardly, I got a call from somebody. She said, "Yeah, we're kind of starting up a new company. It's a service company, and we could make a partnership and stuff like that with like a talent management software." And things kind of just happened very quickly where I met with the right people, sat at the right table, in the right chair, and it was kind of like a puzzle that fell into place where my all I had learned about leadership in the very short while that I had been exposed to it, plus just my ambition and drive, and then the partnership with the talent management software uh, company for change management implementation, and then helping leaders do great one-on-ones, great meetings, and so on. Looking at structures of teams that kind of just like came together, and once again, I kind of rolled into that like, but I knew it was when it was a possibility, it just stumbled onto my path. I knew like, okay, I have to do this because it was, although I wasn't completely alone, it was my brand and company to run, so to speak, for yeah, the better part of 3.5 years, I think. And yeah, I learned so much from it because when I had to go to companies, basically roll out the software, but also make sure these leaders were going to go execute on the next level, make their teams better, and so on. And yeah, it was like no safety net situation. There was no Antoine there to help me. Like, hey, in this situation, what would a person say? So I stepped up my game, talked to a lot of people, read another heap of books after all the ones I've already read before, and yeah, just that in combination with my basic ambition and
Wow.
confidence, I think I was able to help a lot of people, but also learn a lot about myself
Yeah.
in the process.
So that's huge. I love that because, there's a lot of debate about whether or not leaders are born or if they're made. And personally, I don't think the leaders are born. I think that some individuals have certain qualities that will make you a better leader, but I think becoming a better leader takes practice and training, and it's sort of a desire to get better. So the fact that you did that, I think, is huge.
Yeah,
And
I think I read somewhere, or somebody told me, like, I don't know anymore, but I know what they told me. Like, I think it was a COO of that talent management company. Like, he said, like, the biggest correlation with being a great leader, like, I think that was a study that Google did or something. The biggest correlation with becoming a great leader is wanting to become a great leader.
right.
And I think I fully agree that leaders are not born, but you do have to want to be a
That's
great
right.
leader. You do have to want
Yeah.
to make other people successful, and have energy from
Yeah.
seeing them being successful, sometimes more successful than you, or whatever your definitions are. And yeah, I'm not sure if that's a trait that people are born with. But yeah, I think everybody has to learn. You don't like
Right.
you're not born a leader, definitely not.
That's right. And I think the other part, I think the precursor to wanting to get better is sort of admitting that you're not very good at it. So, and I know that that was a huge turning point
Fully
for
agree.
me in my career. Yeah, I can remember thinking I was a lot better than I was. And then it actually took someone who reported to me to sort of enlighten me that maybe I wasn't as great as I thought I was. But that was huge, and I thank her for doing that for me, because sometimes self-analysis isn't enough. You need somebody to make you aware of blind spots. And I'm grateful to the
Absolutely.
person for doing that for me. And I was about maybe 10, 11 years ago when that happened. And that was sort of a turning point in my career. And then thus again, opened me up for wanting to get better and then continue to sort of learn
Yeah,
so,
it's your motto now, isn't it?
yeah,
Like
it's right. Perfectly imperfect. That's what that means, in case anybody's wondering. I admit I'm not that great, but I'm trying to get better, and
I think
hopefully,
it also like it's one of those things like that um I got from you as well, that it just makes everything click fast. So there's a ton of things that you can get better at in leadership and communication and delegation and whatnot.
yeah,
But that core part of just like being okay with yourself and being your
right,
authentic self and you know, saying like I'm the first person to admit I'm not perfect and I make mistakes, but then I do something about them. Like that to me, just like that openness, transparency,
right,
action, there's action orientation in there, there's growth in there. It's in that one sentence is like,
yeah.
a lot of the core truths of leadership is just in that one sentence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of the great authors of the books that I've read, Simon Sinek, John Maxwell, Patrick Lencioni, all talk about the importance of creating trust with your team. And one of the greatest ways to do that is to show that you're sort of humble, show that you're human and that you make mistakes and that everyone makes mistakes, but that's okay as long as we sort of take ownership and we learn from it. So it's definitely a big step, I think, in helping create, again, that environment where teams sort of trust you and will be more willing to sort of take chances under you because they know that there's no fear of, repercussions or which is often the case, unfortunately, which is why I think there's so many, leaders or managers that could use some development. So speaking of which, again, I don't want to forget what you mentioned earlier. Let's talk about talent management and sort of succession planning. You mentioned you really take pride in helping bring along some of your team members. You help develop them. Can you talk to us more about that? Help me understand, maybe with a specific example or in general, what you mean by that.
Yeah, so we have quite a young team right now at Teamleader, but you usually like SaaS companies are on average filled with a lot of young people, sometimes coming straight from college or university, stepping into these roles where they're customer facing in our department at least. So there's a lot to learn there that's quite challenging, and then obviously when they progress, they execute their core job well, they take on extra tasks and so on. You can start talking about other things. Now, the way that I look at helping people progress is really like um, it's kind of based on where they want to go and how they see themselves as well. There's a lot of self-evaluation in there. So our company itself also has a bi-yearly performance review cycle, and then in my team, I add like a quarterly, let's say, check-in, like in-depth check-in, not a one-on-one, like an in-depth check-in on that. We set goals and then we try to execute and grow against them. I think the most interesting thing when it comes to like leadership development and having people grow as leaders comes from all those like um, difficult situations with, they're not, you know, cut clear, like how do you behave in this situation or how do you behave in that situation. And those are the ones that I find the most interesting to be in myself, coach people on, and like and grab back to some of these, usually you always try to keep it as simple as possible, go back to that simple mindset of like, humility, transparency, ownership, and all that stuff. Um, when it comes to like the actual model to help people grow, I don't have it on me. Like I'm not very good at remembering my own stuff usually, but one of the things that I think that is very important is for you to have that professional checkbox ticks. Like you can go to your job and earn your paycheck, but if you're a professional, just like in sports, you put in the work, you take a lot of pride in your work, and that's something that I'm very adamant about, that people see themselves as a professional. So, and you need to, like, there's simple things there, showing up on time, do what
Right.
you said you would do, follow up, reach out, take ownership of something that you do. If you fucked up, that's fine.
Mm.
Excuse my language, but then try and fix it and don't blame it on other people and stuff like that. Being a professional part is very important. And then we talk about like how can you do that, like what concretely can you do, like for example, like a weekly review. So every Friday at 4, I never have a meeting, and then I go through my week. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What are all the to-dos I might have forgotten to write down, and make my plan for next week or the next day? Stuff like that, simple stuff. And then I alluded to a second part, which is, I want people to be really take that professional part seriously. There's like this identity part that plays into that. Like you have to almost visualize yourself as being like, Superman or Superwoman. Like you have to believe in yourself, and you have to think like, maybe I don't have the skills today, but I have the heart, I have the grit, and there's a lot of people who've been there before me, and I feel like I can do that too. And then you
Yeah.
really have to like create this gap between, the identity that you want to have and where you are in your skill
Yeah.
level right now. So we talk about that a lot. So, being a, straight professional, really good, the identity part. And then, in CS specifically, there's a lot of communication. So again, part of being a professional is, training and
Mhm.
acquiring new knowledge in the things that you need to be good at. Like a basketball player needs to do his dribbles every day. And if you want to be the better dribbler of the team, you're going to have to dribble more.
Yeah.
Maybe if you have more talent, you can dribble just the same. But like if you want to have no doubt about it, you probably got to dribble more. So
Yeah.
what I see happening a lot is people like they take the company training, for example, and then they just stop. Like somebody summarized it very well to me once. They said like some people have 20 times 1 year of experience, and some people have like 5 years experience in 1 year because
Yeah.
they devoured knowledge.
Right.
So those are a few of the building blocks that we really talk about when we're growing people. So and then all these special situations come up, and we try to go back to the basics, and that's how I try to look at that.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially your part about doing frequent sort of check-ins with your team members to know so they know where they stand.
Yeah, that's definitely an invaluable part of it. Like, because if you don't follow up, really, then you know, and it's a trap that I follow myself. Like I'm not like I don't want to steal your lines, but I'm not perfect in the sense that like as a concrete example, we just had a performance review in June, and then we write out all these development points, and then the daily grind sets in. You have to execute your operational tasks as a team member, and I myself as well have things to do that are of a more operational nature or like of a daily, weekly nature, and then it's simple things like making sure that even if you forget about it, like you get reminded to look back, and then you look at that development plan and you think like, oh, we're 1 month and a half in, and what have we done about it? Like
Right.
both from your end and my end. And
Mm.
then sometimes you have to admit to yourself that you didn't start yet, and like
Yeah.
it's just important to have those things in place.
Yeah, I think it's a great quality you have as a leader that you care about development of the individuals on your team, because that's not something that all managers do. So kudos to you. And we know that John Maxwell talks about it in 5 levels of leadership. There's no greater sort of calling. I think in life in general, you want to help people, right? And as a leader in the workplace, developing your talent, helping them get to the next level is an art form that's sort of lost upon some
It's
folks.
it's like the
Right.
it's like the secret, like like if I really think about it, like if you make somebody, and it's not like a ego thing or something, but it's like a genuine like happiness, like to the core. When you think about like you developed somebody into being almost like a more balanced, transparent
Yeah.
human being that can engage in like powerful dialogue without losing their confidence, but also not, they don't see the world as in black and white and stuff. Like you really made a change because literally in your company, in for example, some of my cases, they're responsible for 18 to 20 people. So you like indirectly improve the lives of 18 people that you're indirectly also still responsible for. And that's like that's sometimes even like you know it twists my mind that
Yeah.
that you can have that impact. So I that's one of the reasons why I really take it that seriously, because if you turn that around, if you don't do it right, you're potentially negatively impacting
That's right.
the lives of those 18 people, and you're not gonna get everything right, especially not the first time. So you're gonna hurt some people in the process, but I think it's very important that you take it so seriously that you try to be a source of good and
Agreed.
influence for good.
Yeah, 100% agree. Now, uh, I applaud ambition on with my team members. You know, people again wanting to get ahead and achieve their career goals, and obviously them letting you know what they want to do is important, so you can help them get there. Now, have you ever encountered anyone who was like overly ambitious, or they were saying they were ready for the next step, but maybe you didn't think so? How did you handle, and if so, how did you just sort of handle that conversation?
I think I haven't had it like in a blatant form, like where somebody would also disagree with me. For example, after we had the conversation, people would say like, I'm ready for the next step, and you're not giving it to me. Like usually, like I'll be the person pushing people anyway. So I'll be the one saying like, man, I think that's an opportunity right there, and we can go there, and then even drawing up the plan a little bit, like and if we can tick those boxes, I could build a case to go to the CFO and the CEO, and then we can put you in that position and so on. So, but what I've had in the past is more of you know and I think it's normal, like a little bit of an impatience. Something you also inherit teams, right?
Right.
You can't build everything from scratch. Maybe some people in the past have promised them things, but you quickly find out as a leader that that was maybe a little bit of over promising involved due to whatever reason. Maybe they didn't really have the same gauge on their level of skill at the time, or maybe that previous manager or leader, didn't want to engage in the confrontation. So I did have to remanage some expectations in the past, and I think the best way is just to be like really, really honest. Like it's sometimes like most of my responses, like on how do you tackle that conversation, is always the truth but gently. I don't know. I know I stole that from somewhere, because that's I always say that, and if it's like something that sounds good, I stole it from somewhere, but I don't know. So I would say like tell them the truth, but do it gently. So the truth is, and then I do it from both sides, right? The truth is like you want to, earn that amount of money or be there, and my truth is, like, from my perspective, where I'm sitting, you're missing X, Y, and Z. And it's very important that you're obviously well prepared. You have a very clear vision and answer on why you think that. And, also obviously come with a plan. Like, but if that's your ambition, then we can, do X, Y, and Z to move to that, and we can make that decision, look at it in 6 months. But between now and the next 6 months, this is the plan, and
Yeah.
There's one scenario where you understand what I'm saying. Shoulder to shoulder, we're gonna execute it, and you come out on top. Scenario two is we do it with the same gusto, but you don't reach what we need to reach. And then unfortunately, I won't be able to give you the money or the promotion then either. And scenario three is, you're gonna basically mentally check out, think I am some sort of a person that doesn't want to help you, and we can already say goodbye here. Like, those are usually the three scenarios. And I think being like very clear and transparent, but discussing it with them gently and then saying like, okay, but this is my perspective, what's yours? That's
Yeah.
helped me a lot. Like just the truth with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, because I think it's important to differentiate desire and ability, meaning, an individual might have the desire to take the next step, but in your opinion, they may not yet have the ability to take the next step. And I guess,
Yeah,
and
and it's
it's,
also different.
yeah,
It's also different for different companies. Like I mean, I was when we were working together, right? Like I was getting into my first leadership role, but it was like two people or three people or whatever. So, and it was also like a very young and growing startup. So the the level of maturity and skill and like well-rounded leadership that you needed there, like actual skills versus ambition and grit and like I'll just like you know power my way through it and get it done. I know I will. And usually in those situations, with the right coaching, because that's like in a small startup, you can end up in drama scenarios as well. I was talking to a person who is going to potentially join Teamleader. He was in that same position, but he didn't have then the leader above him to like coach him around all those areas, like because the growth stretch is huge. But usually when you're in a smaller company, your impact to do damage is smaller, so you can move into those roles quicker. If you're in a bigger company like RCS team is like 40 plus people, and you're gonna manage 8 people, 12 people, 20 people, like you're gonna need to be on your game from day one. And that's usually a whole other ball game as well from a career
yeah,
perspective.
absolutely. Now, you mentioned you read a lot of books. I'm a big fan of reading books. Are there any, that you would recommend of all of them, maybe one or two, that you think are for, again, for new leaders, maybe wanting to get to where you are, or
Well, you're
maybe,
you're asking me to choose one. Can I peek? Because
yeah,
I do Audible, so I have to look at my list. So
sure.
because like I have a lot, I could just spew off a list right now. But if you're gonna have to, okay, I already know one. It's Crucial Conversations. It's actually a book about. I've only learned this in the last, let's say, 4 years or something. It's a book like basically a couple of researchers. They wanted to understand what makes people successful in the workplace, and that's what they started with. And then ultimately, the research in the book turned into like basically how good can you get at crucial or difficult conversations or confrontations. Like they wrote a couple of variants of the book, and they really break it down into the tiniest detail. And if you really take that book as a Bible and study it, like I can literally say like what chapter 6 is about or what chapter 12 is about. Like that's how I read the book and like studied it. Like that's if you read that, it will change your life privately and professionally. And then I would say I had two, right? I could pick two.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, the one that really changed the way I looked at like, you know, being a human, both
yeah,
professionally and privately, is the first one that you recommended to me is leadership and self-deception. That whole story about like being in the box, and I can distinctly remember it. So like when you um, like a lot of us like go through life and they know they have to do something, right? Or they get an idea in their head like, oh, I should probably help my wife. She's in the kitchen alone, and the baby is there and she's making a noise, but I'm finishing this email here or whatever. And there's a thought that goes into your head, right? Like, oh, maybe I should go down and help her, make sure everybody's okay, and then after we've all had dinner or whatever, I'll finish my work in my email. If you ignore that thought, you're like outside of the box or whatever, and then the thing is that triggers you then to become defensive. Like a lot of people are defensive about the choices that they make, or
Yeah.
even inside their own head. Um, and I really like it's almost impossible to act upon every like good intention you have, but it really helped me like to turn the like it reinvigorated my passion for psychology again, and
Yeah.
definitely those two books those the one will change your life about like the mindset and the person you can be in a relationship
Yeah.
professionally and privately, and the other one will help you
Yeah.
discuss the difficult parts.
Yeah.
Those would be my two.
Thank you for reminding me about leadership and self-deception. It's not one that I think about that as often as some others, but you're right. That is an amazing book. And
And it's easily for everybody out there who's watching. It's that one reads like a story. So it's actually a fictional book with like, theoretical lessons that you get from it. So it's actually it reads very, very, very nicely.
yeah, and for what it's worth, I'll put links to all the books we talked about in the in the description.
That's awesome.
People can
Yeah.
go look them up themselves and maybe read them. Now, perfect segue because you mentioned psychology. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, again, your sort of your education
My
and
start. Yeah.
yeah, and the impact it's had on sort of your career progression. Now, personally, I didn't study psychology in school. However, in my early 20s, a girl I was dating was a psych major at UC Berkeley, and she recommended a book to me by Scott Peck called The Road Less Traveled. And that sort of was
Okay.
the first of many books I read on my own just because I was curious and I wanted to better understand myself first. And then through what I learned, I was then able to understand the people as a manager, the people sort of on my team, understand why they say and do sort of the things that they do, so I could be a better leader. And then psychology, studying it also helped me just be a better sort of father and husband and sort of friend. So that's what it was for me, and that's why I'm really keen on hearing what your personal experience was like taking
Sure.
it
It's
formally at
actually
school.
yeah. It's actually not that like this fairy tale story where it's like, oh, there's this, I always wanted to study psychology. When I was 18 years old and I graduated high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like I relatively didn't have to study a lot in high school, so and I was in academically like a high grade in Belgium. Like you study like get 8 hours of math and like
Yeah.
Latin and all that stuff. I didn't know what I was going to do, so I followed my friends. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I started as a civil engineer first. So I started studying civil engineering, completely like misjudged that like I don't know what I was doing there in hindsight, obviously 2020, but yeah, like calculating in 100 dimensions, whatever. Like I don't know. The only class I passed there was philosophy, and then I had to take all these tests because my parents obviously helped me get started with my
Yeah.
education. For every American out there, it doesn't mean the same thing. It's not like a $40,000 a year that I just went down the drain. It's like 600 euros, so that maybe $1,000. Um, but still, like I wasted a lot of time and a lot of energy, and then I went through all these like tests, and they said like maybe psychology is something for you. Um, and I looked at the books, and then I went through that, and in hindsight, when you study psychology, it's a lot of like sociology, like health psychology. You get like a lot about the body, the the biology of everything. And then after 3 years, you have to pick whether you want to do like more HR, like organizational psychology, or clinical. And I already knew like I wasn't like going to like wear a white coat for the rest of my life because I know in my heart I wouldn't be able to handle that. So I went to study HR basically, and then I did my like my internship, which is something a lot of people do at the end of the 5 year study. So 3 years bachelor's, 2 years master's. Um, and then I didn't really like, it felt like a bit stale to me, with every respect to all of my HR friends out there, because I love like HR, but maybe the company where I started out was not the right fit for me. I felt like I couldn't make a difference. I wasn't really helping people. I felt like I was basically just doing Excel sheets. So I prolonged my studies and I added another year. That's that second master's you talked about, where I studied business, and then I kind of got in touch with like sales and customer service, and then on that career board, that's actually on my career launch. Like by sheer luck, I found like a job posting of Oracle in Dublin, and then I interviewed with them, and I got my start in Dublin in sales. I was an SDR first, and that's when you talk about the psychology part, that's where I really got interested, because I'm mostly interested in the psychology of like individual humans, why people do what they do, how do they think, where does doubt come from, where does confidence come from, where does like what does introspection do, how do like relationship dynamics work, and I'm pretty sure I got like a smidge of that in my education, but it was always a little bit too academic, to like a lot of papers and studies and on success or whatever. But I like not like the books that we like to read. It's more like business psychology. Like
Yeah.
um, that's really like it only started for me really when I got like my first training in sales and learn about business, and then the psychology aspect of the books we read now, like you mentioned, Start With Why, the books I just mentioned, like those are the things that I'm really interested in.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I think it's tremendously helpful. Again, it's helped me. It sounds like the same for you. And I know that when I interview candidates, I really get excited when I see someone who has a psych background, because I think for customer success roles, again, having sort of that fundamental understanding of human behavior and why people.
I do agree. Yeah, I do agree that's a good like thing to have for a customer success professional. Just for me, it's just one of those stories again that underlines it, how I just like I had to stumble through a lot of things to understand that about myself, like what I wanted to do. Like it's not that the psychology light went on and then like, and I think it's the same for a lot of people. I have a few colleagues who have a psychology background and they were like, oh, I
Yeah.
never knew customer success existed. Like, and they just kind of like roll into it like I did.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about interviewing as a leader. Again, you have to do quite a bit of interviewing of candidates. And I'll just share with you a personal story. One of my neighbors was sharing with me his experience about a recent interview he had with a commercial airlines. He's a pilot for the military. And he told me it was a really
Okay.
awful experience. And at that moment, for the first time in my life, it dawned upon me. I was like, you know what? I've interviewed a lot of people in my life, probably over 1,000, and I wonder how many of them say that I wasn't very good at it, because I know that I wasn't. And it's an acquired sort of skill over time. I never had any formal training. I was just kind of sort of thrown into it. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts about interviewing? And again, do you think you're good at it? Did you get any training? How did it evolve over time? Your interviewing skills.
I am like by far and large a modest person, but I am happy with where I am as an interviewer right now. I'm sure like everybody like from 2015 and 2016, like they'll write the worst things about my interviewing skills. But what I said earlier about like the truth but gently, like that's something I really try to use in interviews as well. So first of all, I really have like this, like we set up this strict process always. So like you have an intake call, first interview. One of the pet peeves I have is I always do a role play, and I preferably do like quick ones, like 3 times in one interview. So you immediately get to see whether people take on feedback and they can adapt in fast-paced situations. And then one of the things that I kind of like by accident introduced and then kind of ran with is some sort of like a meet the team, but the team has like veto rights. So it has happened to me like 3 times in my career where I would have hired somebody, but then they got to that like final stage, like oh they're meeting the team, and they said like, no, we don't want to work with that person. So I didn't hire them. Um, so I think, my top three for getting good at interviewing is get a good structured process, try to not move away from it too much. Make sure there's like a task in there, a role play where you can see people in action to remove the talkers from the walkers.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, try to involve your team. Whether you give them veto rights or not doesn't matter, but I think it's very helpful for people to get to know the people they're going to work with. And maybe lastly, I've been in some certain situations where people were wholly unprepared. Sorry, wholly unprepared, or the opposite, they were like super prepared. And to be honest, again, like I say to them, but generally, like when someone's really prepared, like, wow, like you're super prepared, like you
Yeah.
really want this job, don't you? And then when they're not prepared, it's like I would tell them like, okay, I'm really sorry, but this is where the interview process is going to end for you. Um, you know, would you like my feedback is in terms of why this is happening? And then if they say yes, I would say like, and to give them tips on how they can improve and so on. Because like interviewing on the other side, like for a candidate, that's also a skill.
Right.
And I think I'm pretty good at that. It's basically also executing on the simple things like being prepared, learning about the company, learning about the person you're
Right.
interviewing, dropping some things that you have in common maybe, and asking these basic questions like what does success look like in this role, like what are the KPIs, what keeps you awake at night as a manager, like these free questions. Like if somebody asks me that, like anybody out there looking for a job, if you ask any manager what keeps you awake at night and how can the people in your team help with that,
No.
almost a guaranteed hire if you don't screw
Yeah.
up the role play.
Yeah. 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 I'm always amazed when I give people the opportunity to ask questions that they don't ask anything or anything
Oh, that's a
important.
good one, I forgot to add that. Yeah,
Yeah.
major red flag.
All right. Now let's shift gears real quick. I want to talk about different leadership styles, and I talk a lot about inspirational leadership versus authoritative sort of leadership. You know, managers rely on their title to and use authority versus leaders. Titles don't matter because their style is more influential. So I'm just curious, like, let's start with just you personally. What are
Yep.
your thoughts on the subject? Either way.
Oh, it's I think like there's like this like socially acceptable answer where you would say like, oh, you should always use your influence, and if you have to use your authority, you're the weakest, you're weak at that in that moment, and so on. Um, but I think like w with many things in life, like for me at least personally, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And let's say you come into a company, you're new, you acquired this team, and the first thing you do is like, oh, okay, like this is the way it is around here. No, you're gonna do that. You're gonna do exactly what I say and stuff. Like obviously, you're not gonna win over people, and they're not gonna do, they're not gonna run through the wall for you. So I think building relationships, showing that you can actually add value, and so on. That obviously that goes a lot slower, but that's an important thing to do to make sure you have that positive influence. They trust you. We talked about trust earlier.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, there are certain times where sometimes because of misunderstanding, misinterpretation, people stepping out of their boundaries, or they misinterpret the degrees of freedom they have on a certain project, like, oh, I went ahead and approved that budget. Like,
Yeah.
no, like we specifically asked that you would give me three options and we would decide together.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna pull this approval and we're gonna look at the three options. Like, I do believe there's a time and a place for authority, but if you start swinging it around like that's all you have, yeah, you're not gonna lead anybody
Yeah.
across a dangerous situation. And that's also something important that you have to um, remember is, being a leader for, let's say you're like a sales manager in a company that's just like rocket ship, like amazing product market fit, growing like 100% year over year, unstoppable, whatever. Like there's different challenges there, but like if you're not the greatest leader, like it's not that the situation or the environment is always as difficult or challenging than I would say potentially in others. So in some situations, what I wanted to say is you can get away with it maybe,
Yeah,
because there's no one better
right,
to be a leader.
right,
But yeah, I would definitely use it sparingly. But you have to use it.
right.
You do have to use it sometimes.
Yeah. Now, I'm just curious. Tell me if you've ever seen a situation like this. Like, you'll get an individual contributor who's really great at their job. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, the person that distinguishes themselves as an individual contributor is the person that is considered for a leadership role or management role. And then when the person gets that opportunity, it turns out that they're nowhere near as good at managing or leading a team as they were as individual contributors. And I think that's the responsibility of the organization that promotes the individual to ensure that they've been enabled, properly through, again, management training. It shouldn't be sort of accidental. So I was just
Yeah,
curious,
yeah,
what have you ever seen that happen? Maybe
sure, yeah.
someone
And
that
then they
was,
start,
yeah,
and they start like wielding their
yeah,
authority, like we just talked about. Like, yeah, I've seen it happen. Not too many times. I think in the technology space where I work the most, people are getting a lot more awareness around like what it takes to be a good leader and so on, and then just promoting people for the sake of like you're the best.
yeah,
That doesn't happen a lot anymore, but I've seen it happen once or twice. No extreme cases, but it did happen, and I do think that is the role of the organization, and most importantly, because I don't want to blame HR to be honest,
yeah,
um, like the role of the senior leader to make sure that those people are enabled and that they are put in a seat where they can succeed.
yeah.
Um, and I think the quickest way for me as a solution would be to never promote people into a leadership position if they aren't already
All right.
somewhat like 30%. They're already helping people, or there's something, something stupid came up, somebody has to do it, fix it, they raise their hand, or somebody's in trouble, no worries, I'll help you out. Like two people are accidentally on vacation at the same time, a little bit of an oversight, no
Yeah.
worries, I'll cover their meetings, like that kind of stuff. If you're not already doing that and you're expecting to be promoted or you get promoted, somebody's making mistakes there.
Yeah. So I have a theory I wanted to bounce off you and tell me if you think if it's
Okay,
correct or not.
shoot.
I see a lot of parallels between running teams professionally and running sports teams. And I think one of the reasons why I was at least such a bad manager at first is because what was my frame of reference? Well, my sports coaches or my teachers who were in authoritative positions, and all they did was yell at me and the team. And so when we're put in a leadership position, or at least when that was my initial sort of, belief that that's how you did it. You yelled at people, you used authority. So do you agree or disagree with that potential explanation for why there's so many bad managers? Because we grow up with bad coaches and teachers that yell at us.
I do think that, but I don't want to blame the coaches because they were probably not enabled as well. Like they loved their sport, they had passion for the sport, they didn't have any like leadership enablement or something or coaching
Right.
training, and then they just kind of roll with it, and then maybe they won a few things, they won a ring, and then they got to the next level, but they just never like really learned how to coach. I think I think sometimes in sports, uh, you know that just kind of happens as well with the intensity of the moment. I think in a professional organization, not that sports are not professional organization, but you know what I mean, like in a corporate environment, let's say, um, if things get that intense where it's a matter of seconds or like the last play or whatever, or, yeah,
Yeah.
then I don't think yelling helps a lot.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Now, I want to touch upon cultural differences. So obviously you're in Belgium, I'm in
Yep.
the US. Now, I've made some observations and I've formed some opinions, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you see any cultural differences in leadership? Let's start between Belgium and the US, which I think is maybe where you have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Like, let's start with like in Belgium, how do you guys perceive or how are you taught in school? Like culturally, what is leadership all about?
I don't think leadership gets enough attention here as like a discipline. Like that's one of the things that we talk about a lot is like when you're a leader, you invest in the craft of leadership. You read the books, you want to get better, like you're a professional leader. And I don't think that gets a lot of airtime or space in the conversation here. Our educational system is very academic, like into like the I don't know how you call it in English, but like the hard sciences, like, math, geography, like
Yeah.
civil engineering, like there's a lot of that. And even in psychology, like when you like the university degree is very like scientific and so on. Um, really leadership only comes into play like in business schools, like we got a little bit of exposure there, but even like when I graduated from my master's degree in psychology, I was usually some people went to work, I did an additional year, and then even then like the exposure to leadership was very minimal. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. Like I was 25, 26, who was I going to lead anyway? But I think it falls upon a lot of the companies themselves, like to set up programs to
Yeah.
collaborate with vendors and stuff to work on leadership. But when once you asked the question, I got really triggered into thinking about like our educational system, our political system. Like I'm wondering, I actually don't know. I should be informed more, but I don't know how they get trained in like coaching or leadership or because
Yeah.
they're running our country and our future generations. So
Right.
I actually don't know how that works.
Yeah, and frankly, for what it's worth, in the US anyway, you don't get leadership specific training unless you opt for again, let's say you'd get some probably in a business administration sort of,
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
or if you went specifically for leadership. Otherwise, again, I think it's on you to go get that knowledge
But
if you
like, don't
want
you
it.
guys don't you guys have like these like, or maybe I watched too many movies. You have to tell me, but don't you guys have like when you're like a Boy Scout or whatever, or
Okay.
even that
Okay.
kind of stuff? Like, aren't there like like
Yeah.
principles or values there that you learn?
Well,
Like
okay.
you guys take it a little bit more seriously, I think, to be a good, upstanding part of the
Okay.
community, because you guys have a lot of extracurricular activities, all that stuff. We don't have any of that.
Okay, so yeah, so the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America exist, and although I personally was not a Boy Scout, I do know that it is values based and it teaches young adults really amazing stuff. So I definitely think that is one example, but at least in the educate, again, you have to opt into that as opposed to
Yeah, yeah,
public
I
system
understand.
or
Yeah.
whatnot. Now, I'm just curious. So, in your observation, have you noticed any difference in the Americans sort of you've dealt with it professionally, again, from a leadership perspective, present company not included, right? I mean,
Present company, like you are the most of the American leadership I interact with. Um, no, no, I think to be honest, it would be, I think, for me, unfair from my perspective to say like there's like the stereotypical American leader. I think there might be more extremes to it, maybe. I don't know, like I would be hard pressed to find like somebody who would yell here in Belgium, just because we're more of like a
yeah.
not an entrepreneurial on edge kind of people in a sense, if I'm actually allowed to say that. But yeah, I think just like in Belgium, in America, you have great leaders and you have less great leaders. And
Yeah.
I think when it comes to styles, like the really great ones, they have a lot in common. Like they use values, they create this trusting environment. And I think the bad ones will have the same in common as well. It'll swing authority around and not care about you as a person. And there are probably cultural differences that are, more nuanced than I've experienced. But
Yeah.
in my experience, like I've seen as many bad Belgian managers as I've seen bad and great American managers. So
Yeah. All right. Now, real quick, we've talked about Belgium a lot, obviously. So you're born and raised there, correct? Okay.
correct, yeah.
Now, can we talk a little bit about Ghent? Because when we worked together, I got to visit Ghent.
Yeah,
Can you just share with everyone again a little bit about what makes Ghent sort of unique and special? Because I will admit I fell in love with Ghent when I started traveling there, and it was one of the reasons why I enjoyed working with you was my time visiting there with you and the team. And Ghent's a really
sure.
great place. So can you give everyone watching just a little summary about Ghent?
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So like Belgium, just maybe as like before I get into that, a lot of people, especially if you have American viewers, you'll know Belgium from, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Brussels sprouts, chocolate, Bruges maybe, and hopefully as well French fries because we're famous for that and not France. But Ghent is actually one of the bigger cities, I think the fourth or the third biggest city in Belgium, which is about, let's say, half an hour, 40 minutes drive from Bruges, same from Brussels. It's actually a quite small country. And yeah, it's famous for a lot of things. Like it still has a lot of old school architecture, like from, back in the day. Not as much as Bruges, but still very, very cool. It has a very entrepreneurial heart. So if you're a SaaS company or a tech company, if you're an entrepreneur, like Ghent is definitely the place to be. The local government here really pushes entrepreneurship as well. And a lot of the, let's say, more, cool, trendy like businesses, they will have their first, let's say, location
Right.
here in Ghent. And the water goes through the city in the center, and it's all very nice. I remember we had the cigars one time on the bench there in the city
Right.
center. It was yeah, it's a very lovely city. It has everything it needs, and it's not that big.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's a good combination for me.
it's a charming little city. And I just thought I'd share with you one of my favorite stories about Ghent that so for in addition to all the things you mentioned, Ghent is also famous for really great beers, right?
Absolutely,
Belgium in
yeah,
general and Ghent, and you have the old monasteries where the monks still make the beer. They were the original microbreweries, right?
yeah. Yeah, you could
So
say that.
so here's a
Oh,
funny story. And I went to Belgium. I was, yeah, exposed to all these amazing beers. I couldn't wait to taste all these great Belgian beers that you couldn't get in the US. Now, Ghent is the home of the University of Ghent, and it's kind of evolved into a bit of a hipster town, right? So,
yeah, definitely, yeah.
what I found really shocking was despite all the amazing Belgian beers, the hipsters were all drinking Corona, which is a Mexican beer that is common and popular in the US, but frankly
Yeah,
isn't considered a premium beer. And I thought it was kind of bizarre, but not entirely surprising that hipsters in Ghent, instead of drinking the premium stuff that I was being exposed
yeah,
to,
you
are
were like,
drinking
oh yeah, that's what I'm
Corona.
gonna drink. Yeah. Yeah, I think for a country that's, famous for its beers, I don't think we've been putting in enough effort in the last 50 years. We're catching up right now, but I took this trip to Canada, I think 2 years ago, and also to Colorado, like
Yeah,
not so long ago. Like America and the microbrewery revolution, I would say, like,
yeah,
man, you guys make some good beers as well, and we're kind of rebalancing the situation right now. But
yeah.
it's true that for a country that's known for its beers, there's a lot of, not premium beers that get passed around a lot.
Yeah, and look, for what it's worth, I like Corona. I drank a lot of
Me
Corona.
too, me too.
Nothing
Like,
wrong with
there's a
Corona.
there's a time and a place for everything.
I didn't think I would find Corona in Belgium, in Ghent. So Stan, listen, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're busy. I really, really appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me. Are there any closing words, any last bit of advice you want to share with young individuals or people, again, on their leadership journey as they're trying to get to where they want to go? Any parting words?
I usually say to everybody like whatever you like, and this is something that I did came up with myself. Whatever you want in life, be it like money, a promotion, attention, like whatever. There's usually one person, like, or maybe by like max a few people that have to decide to give that to you. And if we stick to the context of like the professional world, like, if you want a promotion, if you want to be considered for a promotion, if you want to be considered for a pay raise, or any other project that you're passionate about, like, if you want to be accepted, like after an interview, you want to get an offer, like, how can I, like, just think to yourself, like, how can I make that person that's going to make that decision or heavily influence that decision, like, the easiest possible? Like, should I show up on time or not? Like, I think that's a very easy question to answer. Should I like be ridiculously prepared and know SaaS metrics, even though I'm coming from a different background? Like, should I like how can I make that person just go like automatic? Like, oh, if we need a manager, if we grow, for example, and we need to have somebody else managing the team, like his or her mind is automatically thinking of me because I'm already helping. I'm already like there every day at whatever. Like, so if you want to grow in whatever you want to do, you want to achieve the next step, usually there's people involved there, and if you can make their life already easier up front. And if you wonder like how can I know what they really want me to do, like just ask him. Just ask him. Like simple question like, hey, if I ever want to get promoted here, like, what do you think I should do? Like, if they're a good leader, they're not gonna shoot you down at all.
That's
So
great
that would
advice.
be my advice.
I love it, Stan. Great advice. Always a pleasure talking to you. Um, we'll talk again soon, my friend. Stay well.
Perfect. Cheers.
Take care. Bye bye.